thank you all for coming back. I hope you had a good coffee break and recharge on caffeine. Um, we're going to have a great session now, a little bit different from this morning, to talk about the intergovernmental innovation solutions and how we can make sure that they're more accessible, but also understanding what's out there. We've got a great panel, and I will leave it to Henri to introduce everybody and lead the discussion.
Thank you very much, Caroline. So, good morning, everyone. So, my name is Hervé Lejouan. So, I am an advisor and I am an entrepreneur actually on the cybersecurity and internet space. I have been in the internet industry since 35, almost 30 years. I was in Netscape, for those who know the name. So, and I have seen many things in the last 30 years in this industry, and certainly the rise of new technology and services that have changed literally the world. And the ones I would think that are the subject of this whole trust and safety conference are linked to everything around social, everything around messaging, who have really changed the way people were interacting with each other. And of course, beyond that, there are the goods and the bads. And I think here we are going to talk, of course, about how today at the international level we are trying to build something which is going to go against that, and it means a lot. It means that we need to put together the governments, the authorities, the regulators, the governance, and we discuss that, and the technology, of course. But still, there are barriers, and we will discuss that with the panelists. So now I'm going to briefly introduce all of you, and then after we will be able to engage the discussions. So Young, I think maybe you have seen her before, but she's the international cooperation link for the KCSC, so the Korean Communications Standards Commission, and she's particularly focusing and fighting against the non-consensual intimate image abuse. And she has launched as well the global regulation network with Australia, Fiji, UK, and Ireland. So then we have Maya Devermation, who is manager at Public, which is a private company, which is interesting here. So it's not only public, I would say, even the name is public. On the privacy, so she's manager on the privacy, security, and safety online. And she's passionate about keeping vulnerable populations safe online, which is, again, very important. And again, she has recently published with her team the International State of Tech Safety Providers, which, again, the technology coming on. Our last panelist is Theodoros Evgeniu, if I'm pronouncing correctly. That's okay. So he's professor at INSEAD since 2001, and in decision science and technology management, and director of the executive education program on transforming the business with artificial intelligence. So he's a specialist on that. Actually, he's as well member of the OECD on expert on AI, and advisor of the World Economic Forum on the AI side as well. And he has been very, very key in terms of providing some governance as well, and working on that, and we will discuss that later on. So, and last but not least, is the co-founder of Tremo, which is a B2B SaaS company whose mission is to build a safe and beneficial digital world for everyone. So from there, maybe we're gonna start with some questions, and basically knowing you first, So Young. So how KCSC basically is approaching the online safety, and how are you focusing only on children or more broadly to other people, as we are talking about NCII?
First, thank you for having me today. Well, just Harvey introduced me. My name is Soyoung Park. I'm leading international cooperation efforts to combat NCII, both targeting minors and adults at KCSC, a media content regulator in the Republic of Korea. At KCSC, to answer your question, at KCSC, our approach to online safety targets not only children but also adults. We put a lot of effort into keeping children safe from NCII and other online harms and online dangers, but we also know that people of all ages can be affected by online harms. So the volume of harmful and illegal content online has increased exponentially particularly during the pandemic, as everybody agrees. For example, we reviewed 3,700 NCII cases in 2015. but this number became 35,000 in 2020 and 55,000 in 2022. Since the internet is designed to be frictionless and opened up for everyone, where people of all ages and locations can interact with each other, a safety measure is needed. At KCSC, we are dedicated to building a safety net for Koreans by implementing regulation and review rules, and by requiring internet companies in Korea to take on some responsibility. But no single entity or agency can end this abuse alone. Countries need to collaborate and share their experiences and expertise if we want to, make sure that people from Seoul to Lille to enjoy a safe internet experience. So, hope that answers.
So Maya, how public is helping the authorities to better approach the safety online and how to respond to the safety online? Because again, you're a private provider, but you're working to help not only in the UK but globally. So can you explain about that?
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much. And thanks so much for having me here as well. It's a real pleasure being here. So, just for a little bit more context on public, because recognizing it's a bit hard to find us online as well as public.io. Yes, it is a private company. But just so for a bit of context on us, what we do is we really sit at the intersection of technology innovation and public services. And we kind of do that across a few different issue areas, one of them being privacy, security, and online safety. So in my work, I work across kind of government, work with government, regulators, civil society organizations, technology providers, and such to really try to understand the different challenges that they're facing from an online safety perspective, and also work together with them to figure out what interventions or best solutions to be posed to, drive solutions in the space as well. But with that, I do want to highlight, I think a big reason why I was brought onto this panel is because I led the research on a paper that we did called the International State of Safety Tech. The QR code is on the screen. That's what the QR code is there. But really trying to understand what safety tech is available internationally. And by that, we mean what solutions are specifically looking to enable safer online environments. Three things I want to highlight from public just quickly. We do kind of three different areas. One thing is kind of research and discovery. We look across harm types, so focusing on child safety, online violence against women and girls, misinformation. We also look at different services, so whether that be social media, gaming, etc. And we also look across different technologies too, so whether that be hash matching all the way to homomorphic encryption and such. But a good example of this is just yesterday we published a report with Ofcom looking at the design and kind of user journey that individuals and specifically children are experiencing from gaming and interactive services. We also do a lot of horizon scanning work. So what that means is really trying to understand what the landscape looks like today versus what we're trying to get to in the future as well, and trying to see kind of where the gaps are and where the opportunities may lie for all of the different stakeholders I was mentioning beforehand to really drive interventions and solutions. And we've done work on that with organizations including Nominet, who is the holder of UK domains. And then lastly, one of the things we do is work directly with government to source solutions too. So a good example of that is we work with the UK government on the Safety Tech Challenge Fund, looking at end-to-end encrypted environments and how to best safeguard children specifically and derive solutions there. So I'm sitting here, speak to a lot of different stakeholders, but really that's what I want to bring to the table. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Mr. Evgenius, so you have been involved in the OECD, working on task force, developing frameworks and recommendations. And can you share with us some lessons of that work? Because I think this is interesting.
Yeah, thank you very much. First, thank you very much for having me here. And I feel I have to apologize to the audience for the downgrade you got because I'm a last-minute replacement. So before going to the OECD question, just briefly, a little bit like you have been, I'm in the space of technology and business and society. Well, actually, not society until recently, for about 25 years, maybe more than that, working on all sorts of different places. And the one thing that that I have to emphasize here is that it's amazing that only until recently people start talking about potential risks these technologies can enable or create for society and for nations, for people, for individuals. It was not the case before, and when I give talks or lectures at INCYBER, where I'm a professor, as you mentioned, that's one of my hats, I always emphasize and try to make a parallel between other lessons from history, including, for example, the following: how was the world in 1950 or 60 when people who had gotten physics Nobel prizes were talking about what have we built with the nuclear energy and nuclear weapons? It took them 40 years to realize this, right? And so history repeats in many ways. And I think that's a very important lesson to learn. And if anything, going back to history is extremely important for us to understand what's happening. Point number one. Now, regarding the OCD question to begin with, um, we talked about a little bit before, and I'm going to repeat this in the end of the day when I give the closing keynote. Nothing will work properly unless we put in place proper governance. Tools, technology, processes are of course important, and as we mentioned, we develop such tools, technologies, and processes in Tremo with my Tremo hat around content moderation, so enterprise software for content moderation. So this is very important and necessary. But unless we put in place proper governance, and I'll talk about this in a minute, nothing will work. As simple as that. Now, governance, it's very, very nuanced concept. It's like you cannot really define it always in any single sentence. However, here are some characteristics that are critical, and I'll take you to the point of OCD. Proper governance starts with values. That's what it starts. Values and goals. And then you go to roles, processes, and everything else. So at the OECD, it's amazing if you see the OECD AI principles. They are public. They're about 9 of them, 10, I don't remember, 7 to 10. Things like human dignity, fairness, safety, etc. It took the OECD probably 3 years to come up with like 1 page of principles. And when you look at this, like, that's what you did for 3 years? But that's the hardest part. Because unless there's alignment on that, forget about everything else. So governance, the lesson number 1 from the OECD experience on the AI and for everything is that put a lot of effort on what values do we focus on. Human dignity, for example, it's amazing. Human dignity sounds like, what does it mean? Well, it means that even though, let's say, technology like AI can do some things better than us, we may not want to let it do those things because of human dignity. It's a choice. Humans govern, technology does not. And that's the biggest lesson. The second big lesson, and I'm going to stop there, is that these topics, and related to that, these topics we're discussing require a lot of different viewpoints. So at INCYBER, for example, I make a point for the past number of years to work and collaborate on these topics with people from Harvard Law School, from London School of Economics, from the Department of Philosophy, from MIT Engineering, from business schools, from marketing, from leadership, from governance, and of course also other organizations like the WEF, the World Economic Forum, OECD, BCG, etc., etc. It's critical that we, all of us, and by the way, here's the point: it's not only enough that we put together in the room different people. All those people must know something about everything. All of you must know something about everything, from philosophy to how the technology works. Otherwise, there is no way to have fruitful discussions. Something about everything doesn't mean everything about everything, of course, right? That's critical. So in the OECD, for example, well, not everybody knew something about everything, but at least they got it. They got it right to put in the room people from all kind of walks of life, if you like. That's critical. And by the way, going back to my first point, and I'll stop there, creating values that everybody agrees upon requires a slow, important, multi-stakeholder, multi-viewpoint process. And no wonder it took 3 years. And there's a lot more. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's move on to the international side as well, and can we collaborate on the new world? So in your international role, which is important, how do you collaborate with other countries, and as well, how do you see the new emerging technologies, as we speak typically about the metaverse, playing a new role there? Again, they're good at the bad. So how do you see that?
Well, so since the online harm and online threat that we are talking about here is, for example, NCII is relatively new in many countries. So what we are trying to do with my role, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to work to release as many statements as possible to denounce the NCII and to raise public awareness of its harmful impact on people's lives. So far, KCSE has signed bilateral statements with the e-safety commissioner in Australia and pointed contact in France. And we've also signed an agreement to share our nonprofit hash database with NCMEC in USA to prevent the recirculation of already verified system or NCII targeting minors, especially. And we'll plan to write more and sign more statements and agreements with relevant entities in coming years, in this year and coming years. So, yeah, and then as you know, technology is evolving very rapidly, and recently there is a growing concern about online harassment and abuse of minors and their avatars in the metaverse. Sextortion on an encrypted messaging app that leads to human trafficking, stalking, and other offline violences became more common than you may think. And now we have AI-generated responses like ChatGPT, that can answer virtually any questions, literally any question. So I totally agree with what my distinguished panels presented earlier prior to my presentation, that these kind of crime, this kind of online harm cannot be dealt alone by single entity. I mean, in KCSD, since our establishment, we've been regulating online communications. So from 2008, when nobody didn't really think to regulate, and then we since 2008, we've been trying to build some sort of safety net, so that we can protect people on the internet. But then that could not be done alone, and that's why I want to introduce the network that was initiated by e-safety commissioner Australia last year, which is called Global Online Safety Regulators Network. I didn't initiate it, but we talked about it, and then KCSC will soon join their member. But I think establishment of this kind of network is really valuable because it kind of we can have the coherent and then one solution and one countermeasures to this kind of online harm. So thank you.
Thank you. So Maya, as you have released the report I presented briefly, so how are you collaborating with international tech and international authorities, again, in order to be better and to prevent more and more of these issues?
Definitely. So at Public, we really pride ourselves in being able to kind of fulfill what we call product policy to product life cycle. So trying to understand what different policies are happening across the globe, and then trying to see what products best fit into those policies specifically. And I think that was kind of a big reason behind why we wanted to do this International State of Safety Tech report, is because what we recognized in the UK was that there's a strong push from government to invest in and kind of prioritize these technologies, but we didn't have a good understanding or assessment in terms of what this looks like from a global perspective. So I guess just bringing out a few of the highlights that we saw from this report, and I think it's interesting following on from So Young, because we were really speaking to providers in terms of their feedback for government on the flip side. So it's interesting to kind of hear that distinction. But what we found in the report was there are around 350 plus safety tech players operating across the globe today. However, over 60% of those are operating or headquartered from either the UK or the US specifically, which is a really strong indicator in terms of kind of where the market is currently. And I want to say in terms of the other kind of countries that were following that, I mean, I think the top was coming in like Australia and Ireland, but it was around 3%. It's much, much, much smaller than what we're seeing in the US and the UK. Aside from that, there's kind of real priorities in terms of the types of harms that they're focusing on. While we're focusing here on child safety, actually what we were seeing is more of an emphasis on hate, on violence, on mis and disinformation as well. And then child safety really being more so 10% of the technology solutions that we are seeing. And ultimately, I mean, all of this to say, what we're really hearing back from the stakeholder interviews that we were doing is that there's a strong demand and need, particularly for support from the government in terms of joint investment. So trying to understand kind of which countries countries have mutual interests, where there may be investment opportunities, kind of the awareness and convening, which I think we're all saying too. What are the opportunities to bring people together in the room? And also a lot around training and awareness, because I think that's a huge gap as well in being able to understand and really bring to life solutions. Because I think what I feel very energized by in my work is that the solutions are there. Oftentimes it's just that people are not speaking to one another. And I think we take a great pride at Public in being able to facilitate some of those conversations and what we're really trying to do from an international perspective. But it's encouraging.
Thank you very much. So Theos, because interestingly, you're on one side professor at INCYBER, on the other side, you're co-founder of Tremo, so you're in kind of education side, and then on the other side, the technology side. So how do you see the key challenge on the technology and companies, and across region, the difference to adopt safety, the best practice, and governance?
Thanks for the question. First of all, I'll start from what you said, which is the solutions are there, but people don't speak to each other or variations. Here is a key lesson from probably 100 years of research, not 10 or 20, 100, literally. I'm going back to the Industrial Revolution, there is research on that. We would summarize the following statement. The biggest challenge in technology adoption solutions is change of human behavior. That's it. This covers 90% of the problem. Right? That's the first point to make. Second, what you said before about Australia in Commissioner Hispanic, was Julie, the commissioner from Australia, she actually announced that association the day before we were together in the panel with her and Yoel Roth from Twitter. And I mentioned to Yoel Roth, who probably many of you know, the ex-Twitter head of trust and safety, we were discussing back in November, and he had his own congressional hearings later on, so we were all silent. Because the three we were discussing back in November with Julie and Yoel regarding exactly the challenges that you're saying, right? And other than governance being one of them, and change of human behavior, meaning what does it mean practically? It means practically in an organization, you need to put in place processes for communication of issues up and down in the hierarchy. You need to make sure you have the right organizational teams for that. Many companies we talk with Remo, especially the smaller ones, they used to, or even the bigger ones, some of the bigger ones, they used to do content moderation inside customer support. That makes no sense, right? Of course, it's becoming now different divisions, which requires their own tools, which is exactly what we develop in Tremo, the enterprise software for that division, which is not customer support. It's called content moderation, online translation, whatever the name is in the company. So that's another change, right? Another change can be anything that has to do with incentives and risk taking, right? So all this managerial now, I talked about governance before, but now I want management. It's very different, very, very different. You have to understand difference. Management requires new processes, new teams, organizational structures, incentives, managing risk, and training and skills. There's the other panel on the other side about the well-being of moderators, right? So taking care of humans. So the challenges are basically, if you open the box of the one line sentence summarizing 100 years of research that says the biggest challenge in solutions adoption, if I may use this term, technology in general, whatever it is, from industrial to digital, is human behavior change. If you open it up, you see underneath, other than governance, all those managerial and organizational issues I refer to. And I've stopped here. It's like 100 years of research. So I guess we'll never end if I don't stop. Thank you.
No problem. So actually, I'm gonna go on to a more controversial thing, which is the barriers, because actually, we are. I think that globally we have done a lot of progress, but there are still a lot of barriers, and I would like to hear your view on that and what you are basically experiencing every day, and in terms of international collaboration, or let's say some technology that are existing but they are not used, there could be fixing of barriers. So Yoon, can you start with?
Yeah, thank you. If I can start, from a regulator's perspective, the biggest challenge that we are experiencing at the moment is that we don't have any single coherent international approach to this offending crime. I'm not talking about NCIA alone, but I'm talking about all kinds of online threats and dangers. We have different, for example, if I can take the example of NCII, we have different words to address NCII and different legal framework and regulations against NCII. And these differences can make it difficult to find a common and universal approach to combat this threat. And this can confuse internet companies as well. Like, for example, if I can introduce, today I'm using the term NCII because to address all types of technology facilitated gender-based online harassment abuse, because it was written on the agenda of this forum. But in Korea, we use the term digital sex crime content to refer to this crime. And in Australia, many of you might know, they use image-based abuse to refer to this crime. And then I do know Panorama Global in America use image-based sexual abuse, so it's slightly different, So we don't have the consistent term to refer to this. So if you want to Google what's happening around NCII in Korea, you have to Google you have to type the word digital sex crime content instead of NCII or revenge porn or any or the term that you might use. So and another thing that I want to point out is that at KCSA, we receive reports directly from the survivors after verifying their identity with their IDs. So we know the content is non-consensual from the very beginning of our investigation. In contrast, some countries need to start their investigation by determining the intent behind the content or verifying whether the person depicted in the image or video is minor or adult. They need to do the age verification process. So I believe, to resolve this issue or these challenges that we are facing, we need to build more consistent regulatory framework for industry to follow, and we need to do this together. We can't do this alone.
Thank you. Maya?
Definitely happy to follow on from that. And again, I'm coming more so kind of from the feedback from technology providers to government and other stakeholders. But first and foremost, So Young, I'm so glad that you bring that up because even as a researcher, it's very difficult. you know, we were just doing a project on online violence against women and girls, which is also called gender-based violence, and it's really really difficult to be able to track all of these things. But that's one of the barriers that we were hearing as well as kind of standards across the board in terms of taxonomies and making sure that there's alignment in terms of the ways that people are communicating about online harms and the specific terminology that they use. So as you're saying, in addition to that, it's kind of data and data standards too. So I think there's a lot of advancements that are going on in terms of data standards. However, the gap which government may be able to fill through intergovernmental kind of support is really being able to provide testing environments, sandbox environments to actually be able to test these solutions across different populations, across different use cases, and make sure that they're not only applicable for the country that it's being developed in, but it can actually be used from an international perspective. Another thing which I briefly mentioned beforehand is there's a strong need, I think, as always, for investment. I think what's kind of particularly in demand here is the fact that we recognize that this is an area that's being focused on by a range of different governments, and there should be an opportunity or kind of further drive forward joint government investments and seeing where there's kind of intersections. If you're focusing on NCII and the e-safety commissioner is too, could you join up together and provide investment opportunities there? And the last thing I would want to say is really around communication and with communication, awareness building, and trust. We are at the Trust and Safety Forum, and what we keep on hearing is that there's a lack of trust between stakeholders. And that's something where I think government is in a unique position in particular to be able to drive home kind of trusted environments to bring together trusted stakeholders as well.
Okay, yes, thank you. Very important point. Theos?
Yes, thank you. I'm going to make 4 points, 2 of them based on what we just heard, and one already made and one new one. The most important probably being, in my view, the new one at the end. First of all, based on what we said, what we heard, um, mm, uh, both, both my dear co-panelists mentioned the idea of the need for standardization of some sort. I just finished an article as part of a project I'm doing with a team on pharmacovigilance. Remember back to my point saying we have to have diverse views? Pharmacovigilance has been around for decades. What is it about? It's about keeping track of side effects of drugs in the pharmaceutical sector. This is a really mature field. And they have developed their own processes, including standards on how to report those things, because otherwise there's no way to identify the potential issues of drugs and potentially remove them from the market. So point number one related to this, there is a lot to learn from other areas, such as pharmacovigilance. point number one. Relates to what you said, but it's broader than that. Point number two was something related to what you said that I just forgot, so I'll skip that one. If I remember, I'll say. Point number three is what I said already. Barriers is human behavior, right? That's it. And I'll make the main point, I believe. And we're just finishing an article that will be published next week with my dear colleague from INCYBER, who used to be a dean at INCYBER and set up the INCYBER Corporate Governance Center, of having like 2,000 directors of boards with his hands. An amazing fellow, Ludo van der Heijden. And we're writing an article that's coming out next week, hopefully, where our main point is the following. Regulatory harmonization, that some of us think is necessary, can actually be very dangerous. Very, very, very dangerous. And this goes back to the following. Regulatory and rules harmonization is about the processes. It's not about the values. So you may have the same regulations in different places, and because of different values that are not aligned, you get different implementations, let alone the following risk. Any of the governments, any day, can wake up and say, today I'm not following this. This has implications. So, to me, this is the big elephant in the room going forward. And we are actually daring to liken it and make a parallel between the UN post-World War II, right, versus us doing something along those lines pre-World War III kind of. And I think that's a key point.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think we are good now. So are there any questions in the room?
I'm happy, I think. But
Oh yeah, of course.
I just want to add one point quickly to what you said in terms of learning across different industries. One of the things that we were hearing from the research that we conducted was particularly how trust and safety tech in particular, can learn from cybersecurity. So it's really highly encouraging that we're actually kind of here at the Trust and Safety Forum within kind of FIC specifically, and looking to see how we can learn from what we were told is kind of where we are now in trust and safety is where they were 10 years ago, and seeing where there are parallels there and where we can kind of draw from learnings there. So completely agree.
Questions? Who wants to? Maya?
Yeah, I can speak to this. I mean, I think age assurance is a really interesting space and definitely one to start off with. I think a lot of the conversations that we have in the UK in particular is the fact that kind of the what's illegal versus what's legal but harmful, right? That distinction, and the harm type that's consistent across countries all the time because it's consistently illegal is child safety. So from that perspective, I do think it's an interesting place to start, to be honest, because it's one where you would probably be able to get a little bit more alignment because there's kind of that agreement from that perspective. What I will say there, though, is that I'm really encouraged by a lot of the kind of advancements that are already happening in this space. There's quite a few different technologies that are being developed. They're being adapted into platforms specifically too. I think we need to move from a space where children are just able to kind of note down their ages and actually work to better technologies. But it's definitely an interesting place to start from what we're seeing.
Just add to this, I don't know much about age verification. I know there's lots of work around this, including development of standards like from IEEE and others. But I'm going to mention another related comment. Which one do you think is the least corrupt, if not totally uncorrupt, part of society and policy across all countries, whether it's France, Germany, US, UK, China, India, you name it? You know which one it is? Exams to enter in the university. You don't touch it. You don't touch it. You just don't touch it. Right? Communist Party doesn't matter. Exams entering the university is sacred. Because once you touch that, the society is messed up. And why am I saying this? Because this is a signal that indeed there are a couple of sacred things across all countries. And the incentives of the government, whether it's Turkey, Erdogan, or whether it's Xi Jinping, or whether it's Biden, or whether it's Macron, are all aligned with this because it's about the future of the country. So to me, this is an indication that probably is not a bad place to start from.
Can we take one more question? Yeah, if any. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone, to our panelists, and thank you to the audience for being there. Okay, thank you.